into the reactor pool. I don't think that happened. It is pretty funny that they put all this work and effort into perfectly recreating the old Apsara reactor and control room, and then their script has Dr. Baba jumping into reactor water. In August 1955, the UN held its first Atoms for Peace conference in Geneva. The event attracted 25,000 scientists from countries like Canada, the UK, the Soviet Union, and the United States. Many nuclear secrets were exchanged. In light of political sensitivities, the conference chose Dr. Baba to serve as its president. It was an immense honor that cemented Baba as the country's leading nuclear scientist. During the conference, the Canadians approached India with a proposal to transfer one of their research reactors. Like the British, they wanted to build a thriving export industry and gain favor with the leading potential customer. After negotiations, the final arrangement was for Canada to build a 40-megawatt heavy water reactor in India called the Canadian Indian Reactor, US, or CIRUS. Canada covered all the foreign exchange costs, about $14 million. The United States provided 21 tons of heavy water for the facility, ergo why the US appears at the end of the name. Canada did at first ask that the fuel be held in international custody. However, Baba fiercely rejected it, declaring that India had the inalienable right to hold its own fuel. He never believed that international safeguards could ever stop a country's progress towards a bomb, and morally criticized those who tried to create a world of atomic haves and have-nots. So in the end, Canada did not attach any strict restrictions on the technology other than a pinky swear promise to only use the reactor for peaceful purposes. No inspections allowed. Work on CIRUS began in 1956. It went critical in July 1960 and hit full capacity in 1963. As it turns out, CIRUS's design encouraged the production of large amounts of weapons-grade plutonium. Uranium fuel rods in the reactor are bombarded with neutrons, creating plutonium-239. But if the rods are left in there too long, then the neutrons will create another plutonium isotope, 240 and 242. Plutonium-240 and 242 are not useful for weapons. 242 is not as radioactive and not fissile, and 240 is apt to something called spontaneous fission, which causes a premature release of energy when we do not want it. So, if we want that sweet 239, then we need to take out and replace the rods before they get overcooked. CIRUS's design allowed us to do that while the reactor is still operational, an obvious benefit. Canada supplied similar reactors to other countries. Many years later, their peaceful nuclear program suffered a titanic loss of face when it was discovered that their reactors helped contribute to nuclear weapons proliferation. Though, I don't want to blame Canada here. They weren't alone in their optimistic thinking. In the same time period, the United States was funding and building a nuclear power plant in Tarapur, north of Bombay. Different design that was less apt for producing plutonium, but also with very few safeguards. At the same time, India embarked on building a plutonium reprocessing plant in Trombay called Phoenix. The plant can extract plutonium from spent uranium nuclear fuel like that from CIRUS. The plant was indigenously built with the help of an American company called Vitro International, which worked on the Manhattan Project. Vitro transferred over the plans for their reprocessing plant legitimately and without issue. Such a transfer would not be possible today, but at the time, regulators didn't know its significance. Thanks to these two facilities, India now had their pathway to a nuclear weapon, technically. By 1962, maybe even 1961, they knew that they could eventually scrape together enough weapons-grade plutonium for a bomb within a few years. This probably explains the timing of the 1962 Atomic Energy Act, which Nehru very hastily passed in September 1962 over the complaints of parliament members. The bill locked down all information about the Indian nuclear program. It also granted the government the legal rights to mine and seize whatever land it needed for nuclear development. And when the reprocessing plant Phoenix went live sometime in June 1964, the Indian government knew they were about a year away from having the 5 to 10 kilograms of weapons-grade plutonium necessary for a test bomb. So, if India had the materials for a bomb by 1965, why did it take so many more years to actually produce it? Essentially because Nehru and other influential groups of the Indian people were against it. They certainly made the efforts to keep their options open, but hesitated in actually pursuing the weapon. Throughout the summer of 1962, various clashes on the disputed Sino-Indian border escalated. Those clashes finally blew up on October 20th, 1962, a month after the new Atomic Energy Act was passed. The People's Liberation Army launched a series of attacks overrunning India's weakly held positions. The war, quote unquote, went on for about a month until Zhou Enlai unilaterally announced a ceasefire and the fighting stopped. The Sino-Indian War of 1962 was a humiliating national loss for India. It motivated them to reflect and greatly work to improve their defense capacity, doubling the military budget in 1963 with additional increases thereafter. For the first time, a party in the parliament, the right-wing Jana Sangh Party, which was an ancestor of today's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, publicly asked that India build the bomb. Yet Nehru did not move forward with the bomb. He increased state support for the atomic programs, raising the 1963 budget 76%, which kept their options open, but he stood firm on not actually going there, saying, "On the one hand, we are asking the nuclear powers to give up their tests. How can we, without showing the utter insincerity of what we have always said, go in for doing the very thing which we have repeatedly asked the other powers not to do?" Nehru's health had started to decline in 1962. He never recovered and passed away 2 years later in May 1964. Nehru, until his death, always believed that making atomic bombs would not help India's growth. Though he knew that it might someday become necessary, he disagreed with Dr. Baba on what that day might look like. A new administration led by Lal Bahadur Shastri took over in June. Shastri immediately faced a new duo of threats, Pakistan and China. India and Pakistan have long been at odds with each other. I will omit their shared history. The US gave military aid to Pakistan, which irked India. But the 1962 Sino-Indian War brought India and the United States much closer together, which alarmed Pakistan. So they counterbalanced by cozying up to China. In December 1962, Pakistan and China publicly delineated their border. A few months later, in February 1963, their foreign minister, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, went to Beijing to sign the agreement. Chinese-Pakistani friendship only agitated the Indians yet more.
Baik, menjelang sambutan perayaan Deepavali yang berbaki 3 hari sahaja lagi, Petronas kembali dengan sebuah filem pendek Sinar Bersama.
On September 29, 1964, the Americans began to tell the public that a Chinese nuclear weapons test was imminent. The Chinese had been clear about working on a bomb since 1958, and once the Soviets started helping them, it became inevitable. So the Indians had plenty of forewarning, but now that the test was actually happening, it deeply impacted the Indian political class, and the ruling Congress party split over how to respond. Dr. Baba led a faction of people agitating that India go build the bomb. On October 4th, 12 days before the Chinese test, he visited London and told journalists there that India was just 18 months away from a nuclear weapon, adding that, "But I do not think such a decision will be taken." Not so subtly, the doctor was pushing to make the bomb. On October 16th, the People's Republic of China fired their bomb. U.S. President Lyndon Johnson tried to play down the issue, saying that it was a crude device, which it was not, and tried to reassure India, without solid guarantees, from pursuing a weapon of their own. Debate raged on inside India itself. In the October 26th issue of their magazine, the Jana Sangh Party escalated their rhetoric for a bomb. The eunuch government decided years ago in its non-violent idiocy to spend crores on nuclear power, but not to use the same crores on developing the nuclear bomb. We had the chance to do it before China did it. In our criminal folly, we missed it. In late October, 2 weeks after the Chinese bomb test, the Indian Express did a survey of Indian elites. Responders believed Baba's assertion that India was about 18 months away from a bomb, which was likely an exaggeration, but urged responsible thinking not to rush into such a thing. Many cited the huge cost of pursuing a nuclear weapons program amidst rising inflation and food shortages. India had budgeted 28% of its national spend in 1964 on defense, $1.8 billion. The atomic program by itself, about $63 million or 1% and rising. Though Baba had anticipated this, in a speech on October 24th at the UN, he publicly said that 50 atomic bombs would cost just 10 crores or $21 million. 50 H bombs would cost 15 crores or $31 million, evidently less than a single commercial plane. The number wasn't dead wrong, but it was misleading, as it excluded the costs of reactors and other infrastructure. And unless India wanted to try delivering that bomb on wheelbarrows, they needed a capable nuclear bomber fleet too. The elites in the Indian Express survey also disputed the claim that China's nuclear weapons were even relevant to India. R.K. Kaladkar of the ruling Congress Party said, "This bomb is not directed towards India. It is directed at the world powers, the superpowers. It is directed against the nuclear monopoly of the Western powers and not towards India." A reasonable analysis echoed by many others in his party, who noted China's restraint during the 1962 war and cited Mao Zedong's own quote that the nuclear bomb was a paper tiger. Ultimately, for Shastri, the more important issue for a democracy like India was solving the ongoing food shortage crisis. Most Indians don't necessarily care about bombs, but they most definitely care about food. So Shastri continued to advocate for a non-bomb policy and perhaps a nuclear umbrella from the West. But he made sure to mention a program of using nuclear weapons for peaceful purposes, kind of like the US's Operation Plowshare, using nukes for making harbors and stuff. The Soviets had a program of their own too. Over 17 weeks in 1965, India and Pakistan fought an intense war. It caused thousands of casualties and had wide-ranging political implications in all of India, and it brought the threat of Pakistan back to the forefront in India. During the fighting, the Chinese, who backed the Pakistanis, demanded that the Indians halt their progress or risk nuclear retaliation. Shastri denied their ultimatum, and China blinked, drawing back on their threat. The UN mediated a ceasefire, and the Soviets mediated a peace. The Johnson administration halted military exports to both India and Pakistan, which pissed both of them off. It also obliterated trust that the West would grant a nuclear umbrella. Indians at home seized the war as another impetus to build a bomb. China's threats, though parried, were perceived as bullying, and with the West philosophically turning away from India, India could only depend on themselves. These questions came in the midst of political turmoil. In January 1966, Shastri died suddenly of what we presume to be a heart attack. Indira Gandhi, Nehru's daughter, took over as prime minister. On the day Gandhi was sworn in as prime minister, Baba passed away in a tragic plane crash at the age of 56. He never lived to see India become a nuclear weapons power. The two deaths left a massive void in India's nuclear policy. Gandhi appointed another Cambridge-educated elite, Vikram Sarabhai, to take over several of Baba's posts, including Secretary of the Department of Atomic Energy, which now managed the sprawling atomic energy and weapons programs, including the AEC of India. Sarabhai is perhaps best known as the founder of the Indian space program. By this time, the rest of the world presumed that an Indian nuclear weapon was imminent. U.S. Secretary of State Dean Rusk conducted a study in March 1966, which concluded that India would detonate a bomb of their own within a few years. Indeed, it is likely that Shastri and Baba initiated a peaceful nuclear explosion program in 1964 after the Chinese detonation, but Baba's death stalled the effort for a while. Then, in 1968, scientists at the Baba Atomic Research Center, or BARC, one of the research centers within the AEC, started work on a practical implosion-type plutonium bomb design. This project was initiated by the AEC's new chairperson, Homi Sethna, who had led work on Project Phoenix, the plutonium reprocessing plant. Over the next few years, a team of 50 to 70 scientists led by R. Chidambaram worked on the design and sourced the chemical components for a bomb. Chidambaram would play a major role in India's nuclear weapons efforts many years later. Sarabhai, nominally Sethna's boss, fundamentally did not like nuclear weapons and doubted their practical benefit to Indian society and national security. He instead advocated for a large nuclear reactor expansion program for the benefit of ordinary people. On the other hand, Sethna saw no problems with a peaceful nuclear detonation. He wanted to do it. Sarabhai must have found out about the effort eventually, but for whatever reason, he did not stop it, perhaps because he shied away from conflict. When he too passed away from a heart attack in late December 1971, at the age of 52, it took away the last large political obstacle to at least a nuclear explosion test. The nuclear bomb's basic design was completed at the end of 1971. Then, in January 1972, momentum began towards a real detonation. That month, the technical teams at BARC began preliminary work on putting the device together. Vital component work began a few months later in the spring. In September 1972, Homi Sethna said that he received the formal go-ahead from Indira Gandhi to finalize the device and find a test detonation site for a potential underground peaceful nuclear explosion. Technical work consumed the organization over the next few months. In March 1973, they fired the detonation system to confirm whether an implosion was indeed possible. It worked, a big milestone. The chosen test site was the Thar Desert in the northwestern state of Rajasthan. Dr. Sethna recalls having to clear the desert of deer, which I appreciate.
ये इतने फोटोस
मेमोरीज के
मेमोरीज का ಇಲ್ಲ कंटेंट का
போலாமா வா பாத்து
யோ குடிக்கானுங்கண்ணா எப்படி அடிச்சிட்டு போறான் பாருங்க போட்டோ பிடிச்சி வைரல் ஆக்கி விடுங்க
ஹலோ அங்கிள் ஹெல்ப் பண்ணிட்டா
அம்மா எத்தனை தடவை சொல்லியிருக்கேன் யார் வந்து பேசினாலும் பேசிடுவியா வா
ஹலோ பப்ளிக்ல இப்படி தான் பிஹேவ் பண்ணுவீங்களா பைசா வச்சுன்னு பார்க்குறேன் இல்ல
தயவு செஞ்சு கிளம்புறீங்களா தேங்க்யூ
மா என்னாச்சுடா ஏன்டா அழுகுற என்னாச்சு அப்பா அப்படிப்பட்ட ஆளா அப்பா குடிக்காரனா சொல்லு அப்பா குடிக்காரன் நீ சொல்லு அப்பா குடிக்காரன் அப்பா இப்பெல்லாம் பண்ணுவேனா உனக்கு தெரியுதாண்டா அப்பா பத்தி
அப்ப நீங்க ஒன்றும் கவலைப்படாதீங்க நம்ம ரிப்போர்ட் பண்ணிடலாம் என்ன போன பார்த்துட்டு நீ நம்பலாமா
வரட்டும் ஒரு உண்டுல நாக்கியம் எக்ஸலன்ட் வெரி குட் சித்தப்பா வெரி குட் குடும்பமானத்தையே வாங்கிட்டீங்க
என்ன நடிச்சு தெரியாம நீங்க வார்த்தையை விட்டுக்கிட்டு இருக்காதீங்க நீ பேசாம இரு உனக்கு செத்து அவர் பேசிட்டு இருக்காரு நாளைக்கு உங்க அப்பானால உனக்கு ஏதாவது ஆச்சுன்னா
ஏன் உயிரோட இருக்கு?
ஒரு போஸ்ட் போதும்ல ஒருத்தவங்க வாழ்க்கையை அழிக்க. இத மாத்துவோமா?
அப்பா 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 ஓகேயா? என்ன பண்ணுது? தண்ணி ஓட்டா தண்ணி. என்னாச்சு?
பார்த்து
மெதுவா மெதுவா. ஓகேயா? போலாம்ப்பா.
பார்த்து.
விளைவுகளை யோசிக்காம பல விஷயங்களை செய்றோம்.
In May 1973, the 61 Engineer Regiment of the Indian Army was ordered to dig an underground shaft for a, quote, seismic experiment, end quote. At first, they refused. They were used to digging bunkers, not weird L-shaped shafts for mysterious experiments. They held out until October 1973, when the Chief of Army Staff, G.G. Bewar, personally told the regiment that Prime Minister Gandhi herself was ordering them to dig the shaft. In January 1974, the regiment accidentally hit an aquifer which filled the shaft with water. A new site had to be found, delaying the test by a few months. The shaft was finally completed in early May. Around then, a meeting was held to make a final decision. The discussion was heated, but the Prime Minister ultimately decided to go forward with it. So on May 18th, 1974, they fired it. The explosion had originally been scheduled for 8 a.m., but was delayed 5 minutes due to a faulty Jeep engine. Dr. Sethna, who was there at the time, recalls, "It was a sense of relief. It was all over." Prime Ministers Nehru and Shastri brought India to the brink of the bomb, but it was their successor, Indira Gandhi, who took the final step to its detonation. She was also a proponent of nuclear energy, but in 1966 seemed firmly against the weapon. So why did she give them the green light? We're not sure. She was a generally inscrutable person. Raja Ramana, who worked under Dr. Baba and led the technical team at BARC, recalled, "She didn't speak in the meetings. She listened and then decided, that's all. Mrs. Gandhi was a somewhat impenetrable mind. It's possible she thought she would gain political benefits, but it's difficult to say what was on her mind. She said, let's have it." Later on, she tells the writer Rodney Jones in an interview, "The peaceful nuclear explosion was simply done when we were ready. We did it to show to ourselves we could do it. We did it when the scientists were ready. How could it have been political? There were no elections coming up. It would have been useful for elections, but we did not have any." So the way she put it, the scientists finished the bomb. They wanted to see if it works. Let's go see if it works. Simple as that. Perhaps we should take her word for it. India did not do another detonation after that first one. They didn't make strident efforts to turn the device into a real weapon, nor did they build bombers and missiles thereafter. Peaceful nuclear explosions were in vogue at the time. The US and the Soviets had their own campaign going as well, firing at least 70 detonations combined before India's. We can probably call it a peaceful nuclear explosion, especially considering that the Indian Army was largely uninvolved. But the lack of official information has triggered some speculation.
Libre, Flowers and Flames, the new floral fragrance, Yves Saint Laurent.
Don't scroll. Watch till the end. Hadili from Gaza, a mom of 3 lovely kids. If you care about my children and Gaza, please press on a single button on your screen and save our lives. Unfortunately, the evacuation process becomes in all area inside Gaza Strip. Really, we are displaced for more than 5 times in 9 months. We are asking ourselves, where do we go? Where we can find a safe place for my kids? We cannot afford more and more displacement. So please, in all language around the world, urgently, my family need you and need your support to get to safety. Engage this video as much as you can. Do your best, and you are only our hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a time of rough relations between the US and India. In 1971, India and Pakistan fought another war over East Pakistan. India won the war in late December 1971, which created the new country of Bangladesh. As the war played out, on December 10, 1971, President Nixon ordered the 7th Fleet, led by the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, to enter the Bay of Bengal. The Enterprise was presumed to be armed with nuclear weapons. Various people then speculated on Nixon's intentions. Maybe the Americans were going to intervene on behalf of Pakistan. We now know that Nixon did it because he thought that the Chinese were going to intervene on the side of the Pakistanis. Nixon thought that Chinese intervention would then have brought the Soviets into the fray too, and he wanted to dissuade that. Of course, that was not going to happen. The Chinese stayed out of the matter this time. But members of the Indian government, Gandhi perhaps one of them, saw the carrier's presence as a form of nuclear intimidation. So one can speculate the test was a sign of India's refusal to be bullied. The timing certainly works. Like, as I said earlier, real government momentum towards the detonation began in early 1972, after the American aircraft carrier's arrival. And then there were Nixon's groundbreaking, world-changing overtures to China, culminating in a visit to the mainland in 1972. India must not have felt good seeing the US and China improving their relations. And then there were the domestic politics. Despite what Gandhi said about elections, the detonation had been quite popular in India as a source of national pride. It consolidated her political power at a time when opposition had started to build against her government. Regardless of the reasoning, the 1974 Indian nuclear explosion had far-ranging effects on non-proliferation. India was the first country in the world to use civilian nuclear energy technology to make a bomb. New efforts in controlling nuclear technology were thereafter implemented to try and make India the last such country to do so. There was immense international backlash from countries like Canada, which surprised both the Indian scientists and the government. So India did not fire a second peaceful nuclear explosion. It would be 2 decades before they started producing actual nuclear weapons. Nevertheless, India, as a great power, asserted its right to the bomb. Throughout all the twists and turns of the program's long history, that part never wavered. Alright everyone, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll see you guys next time.
So what is ClickUp? ClickUp is an all-in-one productivity software where you can manage everything and anything related.
The Rothschild banking dynasty has an unlikely origin, an 18th century ghetto in Frankfurt, Germany. Like many of his time, Mayer Amschel Rothschild can't own land or farms due to his race. So, he follows his family's path and becomes a textile trader.
The ghetto was not very encouraging. Shops spilled heaps of second-hand clothes and soiled household goods into the alley. Frankfurt Jews are barred from farming, from handicrafts, even from dealing in nobler goods such as weapons, silk, or fresh fruit.
Mayer Rothschild quickly grows discontented with trading textiles and becomes eager to explore other ventures, ones that offer higher profit margins. He soon discovers that trading gold coins and antiques could be much more lucrative. Mayer Rothschild quickly establishes himself as a shrewd trader and uncovers a brilliant strategy known today as front-running.
He worked as a court agent, much like today's stockbrokers. His main client was Prince William of Hesse-Kassel. Whenever William wanted to purchase gold coins, he would ask Mayer Rothschild to obtain them from the market. What Rothschild did was this. He would first buy the coins using borrowed money, then sell them to Prince William, effectively acting as both the buyer and the seller. This practice is known as front-running in modern terms. In doing so, he profited twice, once from the 8% commission fee, and also from front-running Prince William.
By 1782, Mayer Rothschild has amassed a colossal fortune and earns the position as the investment manager for Prince William's vast wealth. But for Mayer Rothschild, it's just the beginning. To truly create a strong footing in the world of finance, he must evolve into a bank.
Often when traders and court agents accumulated significant wealth through their financial dealings, they sought greater recognition and respectability. Transitioning into banking was a way to gain legitimacy and credibility.
Getting into banking proves genius for Mayer. By the close of the 1700s, he's the richest man in Frankfurt. But still, for Mayer Rothschild, it isn't enough. He envisions a legacy beyond wealth, a family dynasty that stands the test of time, outlasting nations and empires.
To me, it's always what's next, and I think that's what drives most very successful people. It's never about the money. I mean, that's a way of keeping score. It's about achievement, and it's about winning a game, and it's about upping the ante.
To do that, he knows he needs to think bigger than just Frankfurt or even Prussia. To expand, he dispatches 4 of his 5 sons to the great capitals of Europe: Vienna, Naples, Paris, and the jewel of the empire, London. In the early 1800s, Great Britain stands as a global superpower with a vast empire across continents. With the British Royal Navy unmatched, the seas are theirs. The Industrial Revolution is transforming the economy, making Britain an industrial and manufacturing powerhouse. The financial sector, centered in London, is robust. With the establishment of the Bank of England in 1694, London becomes a global financial center. Mayer Rothschild has built a thriving banking business in Frankfurt, but he realizes to sustain the long-term prosperity of the family, he needs to expand to different major cities in Europe, including sending his 3rd son to London, England. His name is Nathan Rothschild. For Nathan Rothschild, the pressure is immense. He feels compelled to demonstrate to his father that he is equally capable of upholding the family legacy.
Nathan was a fiercely ambitious and competitive man, as quick to take offense as to give it in his business dealings.
With £20,000 his father gave him as investment, Nathan plans to maximize it as quickly as possible by any means necessary.
In the early 1800s, London textile industry saw significant growth. This industry was marked by many small-scale workshops and factories that produce many different types of textiles, from cotton to silk.
Nathan sees an opportunity to capitalize on this growth while maximizing profits.
He managed to create 3 sources of profits from the textile industry.
According to his own account, Nathan was successful in his early days. I soon found that there were 3 profits: the raw material, the dyeing, and the manufacturing. I said to the manufacturer, "I will supply you with material and dye, and you will supply me with manufactured goods." So I got 3 profits instead of 1, and I could sell goods cheaper than anybody. In a short time, I made my £20,000 into £60,000.
To ensure consistent revenue, Nathan also ventures into the lucrative realm of smuggling textiles and precious metals.
He became, in a word, a smuggler. By 1808, Nathan had earned a reputation as a man who had, thanks to his superior management, judgment, foresight, and connections, regularly succeeded in getting goods to the continent.
Within just a few years of initiating his business in London, Nathan reports impressive gross sales of £800,000. Now, with substantial capital at hand, Nathan sets his sights on transforming his enterprise into a bank. He plans to build it to be bigger than his father's bank in Frankfurt.
Hi there! Ready to turn your skills into a thriving career from the comfort of your own home? Here are the top 3 high-in-demand services you can learn to become a successful remote worker. Email marketing, social media management, lead generation. Master one of them and get many opportunities from clients worldwide. Say goodbye to the traditional office and hello to a world of remote working. Want to start now? Join our free webinar to learn about the top 3 services.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Gromenko and I would like to invite you to my free webinar 5 steps.
By 1812, Mayor Amschel Rothschild's health deteriorates rapidly. He soon realizes that death is inevitable. And to ensure the House of Rothschild remains prosperous, he urges his sons to put their family unity first and above all.
This is one of the foundations for the long-standing success of the Rothschild dynasty. Their strong bond as a family and their unique way of doing business are reasons they're still successful today.
As the Rothschild sons establish their banking houses in different cities, Europe enters an age of wars set to span over a century.
Whereas the 18th century wars had tended to be limited, had tended to end in a truce where people sat down and negotiated, the wars of the 19th century, at least some of them, became increasingly ideological and increasingly difficult to stop.
Thanks to its sophisticated finance system, the United Kingdom wages 6 wars in the century without facing an economic collapse.
Today we live in a world dominated by a single superpower, the United States. Indeed, it sometimes seems a little bit as if we've become part of the American empire. Yet Britain was the world's superpower for more than 2 centuries, exerting even more power beyond her borders than the US does today.
By 1814, the Duke of Wellington wins battle after battle against Napoleon and plans to bring the fight to France. But while in France, Wellington realizes the need for a significant amount of French coins for expenses.
Wellington's campaign was being fought at a time of unparalleled fiscal overstretch. In protracted campaigns like Wellington's in the Iberian Peninsula, more sophisticated methods of procurement were necessary. Above all, it was essential to be able to purchase supplies and to pay troops.
Nathan sees this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he can meet this challenging demand, it can elevate his bank to unprecedented heights.
Nathan subsequently made what he had done sound easy. When I was settled in London, the East India Company had £800,000 worth of gold to sell. I went to the sale and bought it all. I knew the Duke of Wellington must have it. I had bought a great many of his bills at a discount. The government sent for me and said they must have it. When they got it, they did not know how to get it to Portugal. I undertook all that and I sent it to France, and that was the best business I ever did.
By the mid-1800s, as Europe turns into a hotbed of war, its countries increasingly need the foreign exchange market.
To start a war, you'll need money. If you lose a war, you often have to pay the other side.
For the House of Rothschild, wars become a profitable business. Their network of banking houses provides a unique competitive advantage.
Back then, the modern banking system was just starting, so they could charge high fees, sometimes as much as 8% for providing currency exchange services.
But revenues from commissions are just a small part of their income source. The Rothschilds understand that in the world of finance, information is everything, and speed is king.
They were one of the earliest successful forex traders, using private carriers and even leveraging well-trained horses and pigeons. The Rothschilds stay steps ahead of the competitors.
As a result, currency speculation becomes their most profitable business. The profit for the London house keeps rolling in, and Nathan Rothschild becomes the richest man in the world. But even the most powerful man in finance can't defeat the ultimate enemy. On July 28, 1836, the unexpected happens. Nathan Rothschild, the wealthiest man in the world, dies at the age of 58.
This was surprising because the Rothschild family was known for living long lives. In fact, when Nathan died, his mother was still alive, and she lived to be over 90 years old.
The London Times gathered itself up for one of its rare superlatives. The death of Nathan Mayer Rothschild, an editorial said, is one of the most important events for the city and perhaps for Europe in a long time. No operations comparable to his have existed in Europe to this time.
Nathan Rothschild's death has a huge impact on the market, but the House of Rothschild lives on without him. Thanks to a decentralized banking system they have created, the banks of Rothschild's family continue to thrive. But now, they need a new leader. Nathan Rothschild's youngest brother, James Rothschild in Paris, becomes the commander-in-chief of the family dynasty. For James, the pressure of being a Rothschild is immense. While government bonds and war financing remain profitable businesses for the family, the competition saturates the playing field, eating away at their profit margin. To bring his family new glory, he looks for a new edge.
Nathan's youngest brother James was markedly less submissive to his will than the other three. The youngest brother was intellectually and temperamentally Nathan's equal. He also had the advantage of a better schooling. Even in acknowledging Nathan's leadership, James was less than deferential.
James Rothschild soon sets his sights on a new burgeoning industry, the railroads. In the early 1800s, Europe witnesses rapid railroad expansion, starting with England's Stockton-Darlington line in 1825. Railroads revolutionized transportation, foster industrial growth, enhance trade, and reshape landscapes, ultimately connecting major European cities and regions. Throughout the 1840s, the Rothschilds provide financing for many railway ventures, reaping substantial profits from commissions and trading railroad bonds and stocks.
The Rothschilds were clever with their money. They often used other people's money to reduce their own risks. James Rothschild played a big part in what was known as syndicate in France during this time.
By now, the Rothschilds are more than bankers, but the bank remains at the heart of the family business and generates the funds that are then invested in assets that are in increasing demand. Metallurgy, mining, and above all, railways.
La métallurgie, les mines et surtout les chemins de fer.
While profits for the House of Rothschild soar, average people struggle to make ends meet. The income disparity between the rich and the poor remains as pronounced as ever.
The industrialists of that period of time are people who were out for themselves to make large fortunes as quickly as possible, even if it means pressing the envelope of what they have to do